The smell of fresh food filled the restaurant long before we even reached the table. My kids noticed it first. Their eyes lit up, scanning plates passing by, watching waiters carry trays stacked with food that looked nothing like what we usually had. It wasn't just hunger. It was excitement. A rare kind. The kind that only comes when something special is about to happen. Or at least, that's what they thought. I should have known better. The moment we walked in, I saw them. My family. Already seated. Already eating. Plates half empty. Conversations loud, careless, comfortable. Like they had been there for a while. Like we were late. We weren't. They had just started without us. That was the first sign. But I ignored it. For the kids. I guided them to the table, keeping my voice steady, my expression neutral. They deserved a good evening. Just one. That was all I wanted. But the moment we sat down, something felt off. No menus were handed to us. No one called the waiter. No one asked what the kids wanted. Instead, my sister leaned back in her chair, casually pushing a plate toward us. Food already touched. Half eaten. Cold. She smiled. Not kindly. Not accidentally. Intentionally. She said we should be grateful. Food is food. Kids don't need fancy meals. This is enough. The table went quiet for a second. Not shocked. Not uncomfortable. Just waiting. Waiting to see how I would react. My kids looked at the plate. Then at me. Confused. They didn't fully understand what was happening. But they felt it. That difference. That line being drawn right in front of them. And that's when something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Something sharper. Because this wasn't about me anymore. They could disrespect me all they wanted. But dragging my kids into it, treating them like they didn't deserve basic dignity, that was a mistake. A big one. I gently pulled the plate closer, not saying a word. Let them think I accepted it. Let them believe they were still in control. Because what they didn't realize was that this table, this moment, this quiet humiliation, would be the exact point where everything would turn. And by the time they understood what they had done, it would already be too late. I didn't push the plate away. That was the first thing they noticed. My sister's smile grew just a little wider, like she had expected resistance and was pleasantly surprised by submission. Around the table, shoulders relaxed. Conversations slowly restarted. The tension they were waiting for never came. That was the second mistake. My kids stayed quiet, watching me carefully. They had learned to read my face, to understand when something wasn't right. I gave them a small nod, calm, controlled. Not reassurance. Direction. Trust me. They didn't touch the food. Good. Across the table, my brother chuckled under his breath, saying something about how kids these days needed to learn humility early. My uncle added something about struggle building character. They layered it like wisdom, like they were doing us a favor. They weren't even trying to hide it. This wasn't about saving food. This was about reminding us where they thought we belonged. Below them. I picked up a fork slowly, turning it between my fingers, not eating, just observing. Every detail mattered now. Who laughed? Who stayed silent? Who avoided eye contact? Because silence wasn't innocence. It was agreement. The waiter passed by, glancing at our table, hesitating for just a second. He noticed the difference. Full plates on one side. Scraps on the other. His instinct told him something was off. But he kept walking. People always do. That's how moments like this survive. Not because they're hidden, but because no one wants to get involved. My sister leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice, pretending to soften the situation. She said kids don't remember what they eat, only that they were fed. She said we should appreciate the effort. Effort. The word almost made me laugh. But I didn't. Instead, I set the fork down gently and reached for my phone under the table. No sudden movement. No signal that anything had changed. Just a quiet action. A single message. Sent. I looked back up, meeting her eyes for a brief moment. No anger. No challenge. Just something she couldn't quite read. That unsettled her. Good. Because this was no longer about reacting. This was about timing. My kids shifted slightly beside me, still hungry, still confused, but patient. They trusted me enough to wait, even when nothing made sense. That trust mattered more than anything sitting on that table. And I wasn't going to let it break. Not here. Not like this. Across the room, a manager stepped out from behind the counter, scanning the floor, checking tables. His gaze paused. On us. Then on me. Recognition flickered. Subtle. Quick. But real. I leaned back slightly, calm as ever, letting the moment settle exactly where it needed to. Because the same table they thought they controlled was about to become the place they would never forget. The manager didn't rush over. He walked slowly, professionally, like this was routine. But his eyes stayed locked on me, not the table, not the others, just me. That alone shifted something in the room. My sister noticed first. Her smile tightened, just slightly. She followed his gaze, then looked back at me, trying to read what she had missed. For the first time since we arrived, she looked uncertain. My uncle kept talking, still unaware, still trying to dominate the space with his voice. He was explaining something about business margins, about smart decisions, about knowing how to use resources wisely. The irony sat right in front of him, untouched. The manager stopped at our table. Not beside my uncle. Not near my sister. Directly next to me. He greeted me with quiet respect, his tone careful, controlled, but clear enough for everyone to hear. He asked if everything was all right. A simple question. But in the wrong moment, it becomes something else. The table went still again. My brother leaned back, watching closely now. My sister straightened, her posture shifting from casual to alert. My uncle finally stopped talking mid-sentence, the interruption pulling him back into the moment. All attention turned. Not to the manager. To me. I looked up calm, composed, as if nothing unusual had happened. For a second, I said nothing. Let the silence stretch. Let them sit in it. Then I gave a small nod. Everything is fine. The manager didn't leave. That was the third shift. He glanced at the plates in front of my kids, then at the rest of the table. His expression didn't change, but something behind it hardened. He understood without needing words. He turned slightly, signaling a nearby server with a subtle motion. No announcement. No explanation. Just action. My sister spoke quickly, trying to regain control, saying there was no need for anything else, that everything had already been handled. Her tone was polite, but there was tension underneath it now. She was reacting. Finally, the manager didn't acknowledge her. He kept his focus on me. Waiting. That's when my uncle stepped in, his voice sharper, asking what exactly was going on, why staff were being called over, why things were suddenly changing. Control slipping. Piece by piece. I leaned back slightly, meeting his gaze for the first time since we sat down. No emotion. No explanation. Just presence. Because this wasn't something I needed to argue. It was something they were about to witness. Within seconds, fresh plates began arriving. Not leftovers. Not scraps. Full meals. Hot. Carefully prepared. Placed directly in front of my kids. The contrast was immediate. Brutal. The table fell into a silence that felt heavier than before. My kids looked at the food, then at me, unsure if they were allowed to touch it. I gave them a small nod. This time, reassurance. They reached forward slowly. And in that moment, something irreversible happened. The same table where they had been made to feel less had just exposed who actually held the power. My sister's expression hardened. My uncle's eyes narrowed. And for the first time since we arrived, they weren't in control anymore. The new plates changed everything. Steam rose from the food in front of my kids, fresh and untouched, nothing like what had been pushed toward them minutes earlier. The contrast didn't just sit on the table. It cut through it. My kids hesitated at first, still unsure if this was real, if it would be taken away the same way dignity had just been. I gave them a calm nod again. This time, they didn't look back. They started eating. Slowly at first. Then with quiet focus. The room around us seemed to fade for them, but not for the rest of the table. My sister's expression tightened, her composure slipping just enough to show irritation. This wasn't how the moment was supposed to go. She had expected silence, acceptance, maybe even gratitude. Not this. My uncle leaned forward, his voice lower now, controlled but sharp. He asked the manager what exactly this meant, who approved this, why the table was being treated differently all of a sudden. The manager didn't respond immediately. Instead, he signaled again. Another shift. A server approached, not with food this time, but with a small folder. The bill. Placed gently on the table. Right in front of my uncle. That choice wasn't random. He opened it without hesitation, probably expecting a routine total, something he could dismiss, something that would restore control with a simple payment. His eyes moved across the page, then stopped. His expression didn't change instantly. It dropped. Not dramatically. Quietly. But completely. Mark leaned in, trying to catch a glimpse. My sister followed, her earlier confidence replaced with something closer to tension. Whatever was written there had already disrupted the balance. Because this wasn't just a bill. It was a statement. Every item they had ordered. Every dish. Every extra. All listed clearly. All totaled. And then, at the bottom, something new. A full table reassignment. Every charge. Transferred. Not split. Not adjusted. Transferred. The responsibility had shifted. From them. To someone else. My uncle looked up slowly, his eyes moving from the paper to the manager, then finally to me. This time, there was no confusion. Only realization. Mark straightened in his seat, the confidence gone now. He asked how this was possible, how a bill could just be moved like that without confirmation. The manager answered calmly. It had been authorized. In advance. The table went silent again. My sister's gaze snapped toward me, sharper than before. She was no longer guessing. She was starting to understand the pattern. This wasn't reaction. This was preparation. I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Because the truth was already sitting in front of them. The same table where they had tried to reduce my kids to leftovers had just become something else entirely. A reminder that they were no longer deciding how this night would go. And the cost of that realization was only just beginning. No one touched the bill. It sat there like a line no one wanted to cross. My uncle kept his hand on the folder but didn't close it. His eyes moved across the numbers again, slower this time, as if the total might change if he read it differently. It didn't. Mark leaned back, running a hand through his hair, trying to piece together what had just happened. His voice came out sharper now, asking the manager who exactly had authorized this and under what name. The manager answered without hesitation. The reservation holder. That was the twist. My sister's expression shifted instantly. She frowned, looking around the table as if the answer should be obvious. She said they made the reservation days ago. She said it was under her name. Confident. Certain. The manager didn't correct her. He simply repeated the same thing, calm and precise. The reservation holder authorized everything. A pause followed. Then he added one more detail. The original reservation had been updated. Hours before the dinner. The name had been changed. That was the moment the room tilted. My uncle turned to my sister, his patience thinning, asking if she had changed anything, if she had called the restaurant, if she had missed something important. She shook her head immediately, defensive, insisting nothing had been altered. Her voice carried frustration now, but underneath it was something else. Doubt. Mark pulled his phone out, scrolling quickly, checking confirmations, emails, anything that could explain the shift. His movements became faster, less controlled. He was searching for control and information. He wasn't finding it. Because the truth wasn't in his phone. It was sitting quietly at the table. My kids kept eating, unaware of the storm building around them. For them, this had turned into something simple again. A meal. Warm. Fair. Normal. That alone made everything else louder. My sister leaned forward again, her focus locked on me now, her earlier confidence replaced with something sharper. She didn't ask directly, but her eyes did. What did you do? I held her gaze for a moment. Then looked away. That was enough. The realization didn't hit all at once. It spread. Slow. Heavy. Unavoidable. My uncle closed the folder finally, but not with control. With pressure. His hand tightened slightly, like he was holding something that had already slipped. Because the reservation they thought they made was never really theirs. It had been overwritten, reassigned, controlled, long before we ever walked through the door. And the worst part wasn't the bill. It was understanding that this night had been planned. Not by them. By me. The truth didn't explode. It settled. Heavy and quiet, pressing down on every person at the table until no one could pretend anymore. The reservation, the bill, the manager's loyalty, none of it was random. None of it was accidental. It was structured. And now they knew it. My uncle shifted in his seat, his authority slipping into something colder. He wasn't trying to understand anymore. He was trying to regain control. His voice came low, controlled, asking how far this went, what exactly had been arranged behind their backs. He wasn't asking the manager. He was asking me. I didn't answer. Not yet. Mark stood up halfway, then sat back down, unable to decide whether to confront or retreat. His confidence had fractured into hesitation. Every move now felt like a risk he couldn't measure. My sister didn't move at all. She watched. That was always her strength. Not noise. Not force. Observation. She was connecting everything now, every moment since we walked in, every detail that didn't fit. The early seating. The missing menus. The manager's recognition. The reassigned bill. The fresh plates. It was all part of the same design. And she had just realized something else. This wasn't limited to the table. Her eyes shifted past me, scanning the room for the first time with intention. She noticed the staff. The way they moved. The way they paused near our table just slightly longer than usual. The way their attention wasn't divided. It was focused. On us. On me. That realization changed everything. Because control at the table is one thing. Control of the room is something else entirely. The manager stepped back slightly, but he didn't leave. He stayed within reach, within sight, like a quiet confirmation of where authority now stood. My uncle followed my sister's gaze, noticing the same pattern. His expression tightened again, but this time it wasn't confusion. It was understanding. Too late. He wasn't the one being accommodated anymore. He was the one being managed. I leaned forward slightly, finally placing my hands on the table. Not aggressively. Not to dominate. Just enough to shift the center of attention without raising my voice. That alone was enough. Silence followed. Complete this time. Because they were waiting. Not for answers. For confirmation. I spoke calmly, explaining that respect isn't requested. It's observed. And when it's ignored long enough, it gets replaced by something else. Structure. Systems. Control. Things that don't rely on emotion. My kids finished eating quietly beside me, unaware of the full weight of the moment, but safe within it. That was all that mattered. My sister lowered her gaze for a second, not in defeat, but in recognition. She understood now that this wasn't a reaction to tonight. This had been building. Prepared. Executed. My uncle didn't argue again. Mark didn't speak. Because the room itself had already chosen a side. And for the first time in their lives, it wasn't theirs. No one argued after that. That was the strangest part. For years, every disagreement at this table had been loud, layered, and relentless. Voices raised. Opinions forced. Control asserted through volume alone. Now there was nothing. Silence had taken its place. Not peaceful silence. Not calm. The kind that comes when people realize they have already lost something they didn't know they were risking. My uncle leaned back slowly, studying me in a way that felt different this time. Not dismissive. Not dominant. Careful. Like he was trying to remember something. And then it clicked. I saw it in his eyes before he said anything. A memory. He mentioned a time years ago, something small back then, something everyone else had forgotten. A situation where I had been pushed aside during a business discussion. My input ignored. My presence reduced to nothing more than background noise. He said I walked out quietly that day. No reaction. No argument. Just silence. The table shifted slightly as he spoke, pieces starting to connect for everyone else now. My sister looked up again, her focus sharp. Mark frowned, trying to recall it. They barely remembered. But I did. Every detail. Because that wasn't just a moment. That was the beginning. I didn't respond immediately. I let the memory sit with them, let it grow into something heavier than it ever was before. Because context changes everything. What they once saw as weakness was never weakness. It was distance. Distance to observe. Distance to learn. Distance to build something outside their reach. My sister finally spoke, her voice quieter now, but far more precise. She said this wasn't about tonight. She said this had been planned for a long time. She was right. But she still didn't understand how deep it went. Mark leaned forward again, frustration creeping back into his voice. He said none of this explained the level of control, the coordination, the access. He said something like this couldn't just come from one person stepping away years ago. Again, he was right. And that was the real twist. I looked at him briefly, then at the rest of the table. Because they were all thinking it now. This wasn't just personal. This wasn't just revenge. This was something bigger. Something that had grown quietly while they stayed exactly where they always were. Comfortable. Unaware. My uncle exhaled slowly, his composure steady but no longer dominant. He understood now that the past they dismissed had not disappeared. It had evolved. And it had returned. Not louder. Not angrier. Stronger. More controlled. More precise. My kids shifted beside me, finished with their food, calm again, untouched by the weight of what had just unfolded. That alone made the moment complete. Because everything this table had tried to take from them had just been returned. With interest. And the past they thought meant nothing had just rewritten their present completely. No one reached for the bill again. It stayed where it was, heavy with everything it now represented. Not just money. Not just a meal. It had become proof of something far more uncomfortable. They were no longer in control. My uncle finally stood up, but not with authority. The movement felt slower, measured, like he was choosing his next step carefully for the first time in years. He looked at the table, then at my kids, then at me. There were words he could have said. None of them would have mattered. Mark stayed seated, staring at the folder like it might still change. His confidence had drained completely, replaced by quiet disbelief. He wasn't searching for answers anymore. He was accepting them. My sister didn't move either. Her eyes followed me as I stood up, her expression no longer defensive, no longer sharp. Just still. Focused. Acknowledging what had just happened without trying to fight it. She understood something the others were still catching up to. This wasn't about a restaurant. This wasn't about a bill. This was about a line being crossed. And then redrawn. I adjusted my coat calmly, the same way I had when we walked in. No rush. No tension. Just control from beginning to end. My kids stood beside me, quiet, steady, their earlier confusion replaced with something else now. Security. They didn't need to understand everything. They only needed to feel that they were protected. That they mattered. And that was enough. I looked at the table one last time, not with anger, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. They had tried to teach my kids a lesson tonight. About being grateful for less. About accepting what is given. About knowing their place. But they forgot something important. Lessons go both ways. And this one came back stronger. I reached into my pocket and placed something small on the table next to the bill. A card. Not flashy. Not dramatic. Just a name. Mine. And beneath it, a single detail. Ownership. The restaurant. The system. The room they had just sat in so comfortably. All of it. The realization didn't come instantly. It spread. Slow. Heavy. Final. My uncle's gaze dropped to the card, then lifted back to me, the last piece falling into place. Mark leaned forward again, reading it like it was something unreal. My sister didn't need to look twice. She already knew. I gave a small nod, not as a gesture of victory, but as closure. Then I turned and walked away with my kids, leaving the table exactly as it was. Unfinished. Uncomfortable. Unforgettable. Because some lessons don't need to be repeated. They stay. Quiet. Sharp. Permanent. And from that moment on, every time they sat at a table, they would remember exactly where they lost control. And who took it from them.